Spending less and getting more is a no-brainer. That's why serious landlords choose Inago. Forget the myth that free software means weak features. Inago delivers everything. Tenant screening, lease signing, rent collection, and more. For free. No fees, no contracts, just a full-featured, reliable platform trusted by thousands of landlords. Plus, their top-rated support team is always ready to help. Ready to streamline your property management and save money? Visit inago.com today. That's inago.com/podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Rent-ish podcast. My name is Zach, and I'm here with my co-host Patrick, who just took a big sip of coffee.
Up?
There it is.
My bad.
Hey, occupational hazard here, Patrick. We're trying to be safe on the podcast. We don't want you choking on your coffee. We're trying to get your catchphrase out. We're your host for the Rent-ish podcast, of course, which is a podcast that's kind of about rental properties and hosted by two guys that work in the real estate industry and sort of know what we're talking about.
But mostly don't. Now coffee.
So that's the cadence, right? Say the quote, drink the coffee. Yeah, Patrick, mostly we don't, which is why I think you're going to have fun hearing us talk to experts. I
see what you did there.
And learning with us or just laughing along at how little we know. Patrick, how's your day going, buddy?
It's good. I had some Skyline for lunch.
Yeah?
We're really happy about that.
Explain to our non-Cincinnati residents really quickly what Skyline is.
So, yeah, Skyline's like a religion down here in Cincinnati. I said down here because I'm originally from like the Akron, Cleveland area.
Okay.
Up here, I guess, if you know.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like what Cincinnati's known for. It's kind of like a saucy, chili. I don't really know how to describe it. You put it either on noodles or a hot dog.
I've always told people that don't understand, it's like an old Greek tradition that came to Cincinnati. It's basically like a bolognese kind of chili sauce.
Yes.
Poured over spaghetti with cheese, onions, beans, crackers, hot sauce.
Yeah.
It is you calling it a religion is pretty apt, I would say.
I love getting Skyline. I haven't had it in about 3 weeks, so I was due for some Skyline.
Yeah, ready to roll. Well, now you're all greased up and you're ready to rock and roll.
Now I'm in a small room with you.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate that. Well, today it's going to be an awesome episode. Remember, follow the Rent-ish online. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, just go ahead and give us a follow and give us a rating or a review. 5 stars. Give us a comment. Like the episode, whatever positivity you can throw our direction on the podcast service you use, we would really much appreciate that. And if you have a question or a comment or any kind of like topic idea or suggestion for Patrick and I to talk about on the show, feel free to email questions@therentishpod.com. Patrick.
Yes.
I don't even want to dance around it. Typically, I'd be like, let's talk about, I don't know, Ryan Gosling for a few minutes or whatever. But we're not going to do that this week because we've got too much to do in so little time. We actually are joined by a very special guest today, and that's going to kind of take up the entire episode. Today, we're excited to welcome Levi Abramson to the show. Levi is an experienced real estate investor and entrepreneur currently working at Inago, where he helps property owners and landlords simplify rental management. Beyond his work in prop tech, Levi has a strong background in real estate investment, having explored development opportunities and even co-authoring a Harvard Business School case study on resort development. We're diving into his journey as a property owner, what he's learned, the challenges he's faced, and his best advice for those looking to buy their first property. Everybody, or Patrick, let's give a warm welcome to Levi to the show. There he is. Yeah.
Hey guys, how are we doing?
Hey Levi.
Good. How are you? Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I also had Skyline with Patrick earlier.
Yes.
So.
I'm outnumbered. We're glad that you're on the show. We're very excited to kind of just pick your brain and kind of chit chat with you for a little while, and hopefully it's fun. Hopefully, Patrick, it can get a little loud in this room. Hopefully, 3 voices all kind of churning at once.
Talking about?
I don't know what am I talking about?
What are you talking about?
If that's how you talked all the time, I don't know if I can handle it. Is that your NPR voice?
This is my normal voice, Zach.
But mostly we don't. All right, Levi. So we're here to talk to you about your experience in the industry, property management, real estate, entrepreneurism. Like we got all this stuff. We got tons of questions that we're going to kind of go through. But before we kind of really jump into grilling you on all your background and everything, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey, who you are, what makes you tick, and why you're here today.
Sure. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do on what makes me tick today. Hopefully it's not an episode full of that. But about 10 years ago, a buddy from high school and I invested in our first property it was one of those things that we had always talked about. I think a lot of people have that conversation of, what if we invested in a place and just kind of had it as side income when retirement rolls around, that kind of thing.
Right.
And we did one together. Again, it was a friend from high school, so it was somebody I was comfortable with, who I was pretty confident getting into business with them. And the one went really well. We definitely invested at a good time. There's a lot of luck involved in this, as there often is, but there was a lot of luck. We did really well on that one, and I think we just got more and more interested. So I had a little bit of business background. I went to business school for undergrad and was already working in the tech space, and it kind of just aligned. It was a perfect opportunity of a lot of opportunity for tech to make it better. So we pretty quickly went from collecting check payments to online, and then started investing in more properties. The one went well, so we bought another one. They were cash flowing. The market was going well, and so that kind of just went into a larger and larger business. You mentioned the business school. I went to Harvard for business school and focused on real estate there. And around the same time, the portfolio started getting big enough that it really became more than just a side thing where we were doing 1 hour a week. And that was when we started looking at different ways to manage the properties. And so we started out collecting checks and doing everything on a spreadsheet. We moved over to another software. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name, but originally started.
We don't know.
Don't ask us.
We'll say whatever we want, then they just censor us later.
They're not around anymore anyway.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, purchased by another company, and not around anymore. And then ended up looking for different options, settled on Inago, and the rest is history. We scaled up the portfolio from there and have been using Inago for about 5 or 6 years since that.
That is awesome.
I have a quick question. I don't know if you wanted to structure this or anything.
Jump in. The water's fine.
So I think Zach and I, we're coming from a place like neither of us own real estate at this point, but I think we both expressed interest in owning properties and a rental property. Getting your first property, and you mentioned you did it with a high school friend. Did you have to wait for like the perfect opportunity for like the stars to align, or like how did you get them? How did it work out that you were able to buy your first property?
Yeah, that's a great question. I obviously get that question a lot. People are curious, if they're kind of on the other side of having their first property, and it really is a comfort thing getting the first property. It's very daunting being on the other side.
Right.
I remember we looked for places for a really long time, and it did feel like we needed the perfect place. Now, of course, there's a balance. I think if you spend years looking for the perfect place, it's never going to come, and
right.
you're just never going to get over that hump. But on the other side, it obviously does take some research and some idea of what parameters you're looking for in a property. But there's no question that going from 0 to 1 property was the biggest hurdle by far. It's a scary thing. I mean, you're putting real money down, depending on how you structure your loan and whatever your partnership looks like. It's real money. You have skin in the game, and you could lose money too. So getting to that first one was a big hurdle. I think your question was around understanding if the stars had to align, or if it had to be perfect. There's no question that it took like a leap of faith. I think the conditions were never going to be 100% perfect, but we had some good idea of what we wanted, and I think we did some good analysis on the front end. It wasn't anything excessive, but just an idea of getting comfortable with what does a mortgage payment look like, what is escrow, some of these basic things, and also investing in a market we were comfortable with. We're from the Colorado Springs area originally, and that is where our first property was.
Oh, gotcha.
Spending less and getting more is a no-brainer. That's why serious landlords choose Inago. With features like tenant screening, lease signing, and rent collection, Inago gives you everything you need for free. No fees, no contracts, just powerful property management made simple. Visit inago.com/podcast to sign up. That's inago.com/podcast. And you said that the first property that you got was with a high school friend. You were in college at the time when you acquired the property. Is that right?
It was post-college. So we had already graduated. We were earning a little bit of income from our first jobs. And I think you pointed out the high school friend. It's also a question I get a lot going into business with a friend or family. I think that's something a lot of people are nervous about, or a frequent question. And it is something that I think is definitely a big consideration, and something that we struggled with at first. We've had our minor blowups for sure, and it isn't always perfect, but there's no question that the first thing you need to do is have somebody that you trust. And sure. I think we do have a lot of trust for each other. And that's where we've been able to manage for 10 years, despite not having the same closeness that we did in high school.
Yeah, that's awesome. Patrick, don't get any ideas. Hey, we're like
you and me, baby.
You want to start looking?
Let's do it.
Got it. Super house. We'll get the barn dominium complex.
Oh,
started.
Dude, I'm down.
Yeah, shout out to that old episode of Rentish.
The real ones know.
The real fans. The real ones know. The one that aired not that long ago.
I have no idea when it aired.
All right, so I would like to ask you a question. If we can skip over it if you want to, but before you went to college to study real estate, was your major was what again?
So I did undergrad at University of Pennsylvania. I was just general business, so economics. Okay. I actually in undergrad did not study real estate at all. I had essentially no interest in it, and then kind of shifted to the conversations that I was talking about, where the friend and I started looking at the numbers and seeing if it made sense, and then really focused in business school. But by that time, we already did have a smaller portfolio.
So acquiring the property, that first property was kind of the thing that really set the whole thing in motion for you, right? You would say that was kind of like the nexus point?
Yeah, and I mean, by the time I was in business school, I think there's no question that at least at like a front line level, I already had a really good idea of what property ownership and management looked like. Of course, there's this whole different ballgame of private equity and a lot of the complicated stuff that most people would never get into, myself included, that really came from business school. But it really, most of the expertise and the super helpful, knowledgeable stuff came from actually managing properties and learning by doing. I mean, we made mistakes, and those were some of the most valuable things that happened.
I would like to know your search process. As you're talking to a couple of guys in here in this room that, like Patrick said, we are kind of we're interested in eventually one day having like an investment property or purchasing properties of our own. What was your search process like, and what is it still like? I mean, what criteria do you look for in the perfect house, like, or the perfect place, like whether it's residential, commercial, what are the things that you really start from square one at?
Yeah, I think for me, it's. I think everybody is going to have a different answer to this question. Mm-hmm. For me, it's really the marriage of real world conditions and what's happening in the neighborhoods that you're looking at with the hard numbers. And I don't think you can over rely on one of those. I think when you look at the numbers side, you always have things like cap rates, NOI, IRR, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with those specific terms. You probably should get a little bit familiar before you jump in.
Yeah, I think that's
probably a good idea.
That's why we have special guests. Like shout out to Mary, who's on the show sometimes, or one of our special guests, Mary Regano, who gives us those the real estate term question games. So you can listen to one of those episodes.
Yeah, I think
we're learning.
I think she's also a business school alum, so she probably picked a lot of those up there. But you look at something like cap rate, which is basically just the ratio of what a house costs or a property costs versus what you're renting it for. But those numbers will vary wildly depending on what market you're looking at. If you're looking at a really big market, New York City, you're going to have really low cap rates because properties are more expensive relative to the rental prices you're getting. But that doesn't mean that a low cap rate or a high cap rate is always good. You have to marry it with the real world conditions of what do I think about this city? What kind of tenants am I going to get? Am I in a neighborhood where there's maybe a lot of college students that are going to, my property is going to have a lot of maintenance costs, or is it in an area that's growing really fast? So it really is, your question was around the search criteria. I think you just have to have an idea of what kind of cap rate am I looking at, what kind of return, with what financing can I get, and marry that with your understanding of the market, which is why we invested the first series of properties that we got in a market that we did feel comfortable in. We knew the neighborhoods. We knew what kind of cap rate would be worth the risk to put it.
So I have a question, and I'm not sure if you already kind of covered a little bit of this, but with all of the properties that you have, you said the first one was in Colorado Springs, where you're from.
Yeah, that's right.
From there, other properties that you might have purchased, were they like not all based in Colorado? Have you bought properties in other states?
Yeah, so we did purchase the first one in the first couple of single family homes in Colorado Springs. You know, the market the last 10 years, as anyone who's paid any attention knows, has been pretty crazy. There's been markets where the appreciation has been great for current owners and maybe has priced out some people who live there or who are looking at investing. So we had been investing in Colorado Springs. Prices did end up going up quite a bit, which, you know, appreciation is one of the ways that you make money in real estate investing. So it was good for the properties that we did purchase. But by the time that we were looking to expand more, we did start looking at other markets. So we have the portfolio in Colorado Springs, but we did a cash out refi. So basically refinancing that loan into one portfolio loan, which we can go whatever direction you guys want, but that might be a little bit too technical for this. But we basically pulled some cash out, and then we looked across the U.S. and we looked at exactly what I was just talking about around cap rates,
right,
and what our hypothesis was of all of these different cities we were looking at, and ended up investing in Tennessee. So Colorado and Tennessee are the two states that we have properties.
And what's it like? Obviously, you can't be in both Colorado and Tennessee at the same time, and I don't think you're based in either state at the moment, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So like, what's it like owning and to a certain degree managing properties in completely different places?
Yeah, I would answer it with kind of the same marriage of two things. You have the real world people that you work with. So it's really important to concentrate on the team that you have and focus on getting the right people for acquiring properties. That could be a broker, depending on how you're purchasing these properties, an agent or a broker. For the ongoing maintenance, obviously you want a good handyman, you want a good team of people that you trust and that you think are going to do you right when it comes to repairing those properties. But the other piece is technology. I think a lot of people underestimate how valuable technology has become in the last couple of years. And, you know, you mentioned at the beginning that I work at Inago. I also use the software to manage properties, and that's how I found the company in the first place to work in product here. And so we use Inago for collecting rent, managing maintenance requests, everything else. And it is a very valuable tool. It creates invoices for people to pay. We track all of that through that. So rather than receiving a number of paper checks at one address and kind of having to manage, did it get lost in the mail? How do I mark this on the spreadsheet? Mm-hmm. How do I send out these notices? It really consolidates all of that. It helps with listing. So when a lease is going to be up, we can relist it online and use the syndication network for that. Leases, e-signing, that's probably the biggest one. That was one of the reasons we started using Inago in the first place. We don't juggle 50 paper leases. We have it online as a template. It takes probably 5-6 minutes to create a new lease, and then it just gets sent out, e-signs, and then Inago keeps a record of all of that. So when I do need that lease, I have a record without even having to think of, how am I going to organize all of this, do all of that. So when you have those two pieces, I think you have a really valuable toolkit that maybe without the internet would have been really difficult 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
That really makes it a lot more manageable.
Yeah, for newcomers too. I mean, it's like you have to imagine now is probably in the history of this planet probably the best time to be a small time landlord.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what would you have done differently if you had the access to today's kind of technology when you were buying your first property? Like,
I'm not that old, so
that's fair. That question did make it seem like you were much older than you are.
The technology is mostly the same, but I get your
yeah. Like what's changed since when you bought your first property to now?
Yeah, I think the leases was the biggest thing. I mean, we really were doing the traditional paper check leases, and I remember having to prepare those PDFs. There were a few that we even sent physically in the mail, and it's just a process you have to manage, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
A lease is a lease. Of course, there are certain things that you can customize, and you can also do that through Inago. But there are certain things you have to customize, but you sign a lease, and then you just need the document. So that was probably the biggest thing. But from the beginning, I think we've used some technology for getting it listed, for making sure people can see it. Yeah, I don't think there's been any huge changes the last couple of years.
Cool.
I think the other quick pitch I would give is, there's that whole process of people moving in and moving out. And I think what I love about my job working at Inago in product is I also get to focus on what are things that I want as somebody who also is a landlord. And so, for instance, one of the really big things over the last couple of months that we had seen was the same thing as the leases that I was just talking about with move in, move out checklists, right? Like there has to be somebody there with a physical piece of paper marking it and saying, what exactly is wrong with the house? How do I keep a record of this? It protects the tenant and the landlord. And I think a lot of landlords don't do it because there's no easy solution. It's not like collecting rent online. There's no easy way to do that. And so at Inago, we rolled out the move in, move out checklist as a damage report where tenants go through the house, they see what's wrong with it, they mark it up, and they submit it through the app, and it does the same thing. It creates a PDF that I have as a landlord when they move out, so I know what damage was there. I don't charge them unfairly, but also I'm protected if they do damage and say, nope, it was there before.
So I got a question. So with all this technology...
I just love it. So with all this technology, we sound... Having Levi is awesome in this room, but it's like, I'm like, man, I feel not as smart as I did 20 minutes ago. Continue, Patrick.
I don't even know where I was going with that. Is there anything, because you mentioned having the technology like Inago and having a team of like maintenance personnel and whatever that you can depend on, is there anything that you still have to go to like Colorado or Tennessee, like to those rental properties that you own, specifically go out there for? Is there any part of this process that you can't accomplish remotely?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be based on comfort level and stuff. I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the people that we have, maintaining the properties and the team. I think there's always going to be some risk there. So, of course, meeting somebody in person and being able to have those face-to-face conversations and relationships, you're never going to be able to fully replicate that. Yeah. I think as I mentioned before, there's always some luck. I think we've been pretty lucky with the people that we found. But, we're in 3 cities now, one in Colorado Springs, and then Knoxville and Chattanooga. We've struggled a little bit more in Tennessee because we haven't been there as long and don't have those relationships. And there are times where finding the right maintenance person can be more difficult. So I wouldn't say it's a must, but there are some benefits for sure for being in person. And then you have the unfortunate situations where, it's helpful to just be around if you need to stop by and look at a house, or if something goes to court, something like that. Again, we've been pretty lucky on that front, but there will always be things that require some in-person interaction. So I wouldn't pick somewhere that you never want to go or that is impossible for you to get to. But I would say that if you're doing, the maintenance people and you're screening your tenants correctly, it hopefully is minimized to as little as you want to go there.
Right.
So circling all the way back around, we've heard a lot about, everything that you've had to do with your property management over the years. And I want to know, in terms of your first property, because I do think that originally we were supposed to kind of really get down to what was it like, jumping into all of this from the very get-go. So we got a couple questions, I think, to talk about that very first property that you got.
Sure.
What was the most stressful part? If you had to pin exactly, like, what was the thing that caused the most stress, or like, you ever feel anxious when you were buying that first property?
You asked about stress. I think the honest answer about stress is you often stress about the things that don't end up mattering, or that in retrospect aren't so important or so big. So I already answered it a little bit earlier, but I think looking back, the area where we felt the most anxiety was definitely around purchasing it and getting those first tenants, because it is that hurdle. There was a lot of stress around, are we making the right decision? Did we overpay for this property? I think that's where the bulk of the stress comes from. I think also, the first maintenance requests are the first things that go wrong, even if they're minor. We were lucky in that the first couple of places we bought were not disasters. I mean, we do have a few horror stories here and there, but we were pretty lucky at the beginning. But, the first time that there's a major repair, that something goes wrong, I think you're also like, am I in over my head, or did I miscalculate this property? Is there a ton of maintenance that needs to be done? So I think it's around kind of the first learning experiences cause the most stress.
Okay.
And I'm sure there will be stressful days ahead for things that we haven't quite mastered.
Yeah. Do you feel like you gain a thicker skin to it over time? Like these things just bother you less and less?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I think we're just better at managing the processes too. I mean, earlier today, a tenant was texting me about a specific issue. And I think for the first property, it would have been, I need to be out the door calling this person and being ASAP instead of saying, hey, just put a maintenance request in, my partner handles X, Y, and Z.
Right.
There's a process for this, and we'll make sure it gets done correctly and fairly.
That's good advice.
And earlier you had said the biggest hurdle was definitely going from 0 to 1. How was, because obviously you own tons of properties now.
Not quite tons.
Okay, more than one,
it's your
more than two.
definition of tons.
Yeah.
You said 3 different, so at least 3, because you said 3 locations. How much different is it now than it was when you just had one property to manage? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm going to be an advocate for the software I use because I work at Anago, but there's no question that scaling becomes a lot easier. I think that it's the same answer. 0 to 1 is the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
Once you have a portfolio and you're collecting rent, like you're sending out late notices, you're collecting rent. There's a process. There's maintenance requests. I'm trying to think of the biggest things that changed. I think financing is always an interesting question when you get to bigger portfolios. If you're doing one single family home or you're looking at maybe dipping your toes in the water, you're probably looking at going to a traditional Freddie and Fannie mortgage, going to a bank and getting one loan. And when you have a larger portfolio, there's more options. There's more exciting things you can do. You can pull cash out. Kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. So I think financing is a really interesting thing when the portfolio gets bigger. But in terms of managing day to day, I can't think of any huge changes. I think once you nail down a process, my business partner handles some certain things that he's better at. He's more on the maintenance front, dealing with handy people and directly with the tenants. I do more of the finances and leases and stuff. And so we have a good split. I think at a certain point, it doesn't matter how many properties we have. We just do the same thing at a bigger scale.
Gotcha.
But there's no question that marginally it becomes less and less when you add more.
That makes sense.
For people like Patrick and I, we've talked on the podcast for a couple weeks, a few episodes about wanting to buy not just investment properties, but your own personal property, like looking for just property to purchase, period.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for people like looking in that realm as well? Like you guys have purchased properties, but you sounds like a vast majority of them have been investment properties that you're like managing rather than like your own personal.
Yeah, that's a good
home.
question. I think I've thought a lot about this because I think once you get in that mindset of viewing properties as an investment and as a tool for cash flow or whatever your goals might be in purchasing properties, there is this risk of viewing all property as just an investment. And I think you hear it a lot. I think you hear people doing the trade-offs of, is it worth renting or buying, or is this property, what does the cap rate look like, whatever, for a property that they're actually purchasing to live in. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's two sides of that coin. I think it can be a huge positive. I think it's valuable to understand those metrics and understand, am I throwing away money in rent, or is this actually a good investment? But of course, I think the other side of that coin is not everything needs to be viewed in that lens. If you're buying a property to live in, it doesn't need to be the best financial decision ever. It doesn't need to be perfect cap rate or a property that you would want to rent out.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think if that fits with their lifestyle and, they want to have an ADU on the property that they're renting out or Airbnb it sometimes, more power to them. But I think it's a tool to have rather than how you should be viewing properties that you're buying. So yeah.
Cool.
I actually have a follow-up on that because
Sure.
I think maybe it was the last episode or 2 episodes ago, we were talking about like buying a rental property while still renting yourself. Like when you bought your first rental property with your friend, were you still like the property you were living in? Were you still renting?
Yeah, I still rent now.
Okay.
I live in New York and I rent there. And yeah, I go through a lot of the same calculation of, does it make sense to buy? What would that look like? I think no question, as I spoke to earlier, I would be a lot more comfortable purchasing a house to live in just because it's a process, and all of these terms that might scare people like mortgage, escrow, are super familiar to me now. But I still rent as well.
Gotcha.
What would it take for you to buy property in New York City?
A few million more.
Okay, cool. Patrick, what do you say we dive into the listener mailbag and ask Levi and some questions?
Now we got some backup.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think we can answer, we'll just kind of throw it out into the group and discuss, and, we'll see where it goes. Kick it off? You want me to?
Sounds like you want me to.
I think I do want you to kick it off. Yeah.
Say what you feel.
Patrick, do it.
Okay. First question. Annabelle from Orchard Park, New York asks, what's the best way for renters to evaluate whether a neighborhood is right for them? I mean, I don't know. As a renter, I think it depends so much on what you want to get out of the neighborhood. You know?
This is a tough question for me because it's I've always lived in the greater Cincinnati area, and I know the neighborhoods.
Right.
So it's I pick the neighborhood, I go to the neighborhood, I know what the vibe is like. So it's easy for me to be as a renter, kind of be oh, I know what this part of town's atmosphere is like compared to this part of town. I know I'm going to be safer in this part of town than another one. So I don't know. It's kind of instinctual almost. I don't know how you feel. Levi.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned I live in New York. I'm a big walker. Not every city in the U.S., most cities in the U.S. are not super walkable, but
right.
Whether you think you're going to be walking around or driving around a lot, I think visiting the area you're going to be in and just feeling comfortable there, no question. I mean, I walked around where I live quite a bit before I moved there, and I mean, I find myself walking 5 miles a day in the area, so that's probably the biggest thing for me.
No, that makes sense. And I remember when I first moved to Cincinnati and I was asking some people who were familiar with Cincinnati, any recommendations on neighborhoods or properties or whatever. And it was interesting because depending on who I asked, there were different kinds of recommendations. I know for some people it's important to have a big apartment complex with a ton of amenities. Some people don't want to share walls and when I have some friends come visit me, they like my apartment. They understand why I want to live where I do, but they would never want to live in that sort of situation. In the city, I like walking, but some people, would not want to live downtown in the city. So.
Well, I figured it would be most important to you, the radius of fast food restaurants.
Yeah. That was definitely
Skyline Chili.
There is a Skyline Chili 9-minute walk from my apartment.
You've mapped it out exactly.
Yeah,
it's exactly 1,200 steps. All right, next question. Jasmine from Minneapolis writes in, says, what are some strategies for purchasing a high-quality investment property at a low price? So she's looking to get the best bang for her buck in some respects. So I wonder if this might be geared for our friend Levi to answer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think anyone wants to buy the best property they can at the lowest price.
Yeah.
That's a hot take, Jasmine.
And there's no question too that it's a lot more competitive the last couple of years, and a lot of the things around rentals that we talked about with technology, I think, has also made it more competitive. It isn't the days where you can find a sign and go talk to the owner with all of the online syndication for properties that are for sale. Anyone can find, at least if they're listed publicly. So when you're actually in negotiations, I think one of the biggest takeaways I had is to always think about what the other side wants. There can be win-wins in these negotiations and these conversations. A seller might be less worried about what closing costs look like because they're about to get a big payout, whereas a buyer might be more concerned because they're the ones putting money down. And so, you might be able to negotiate on the selling price, but have some of that come back at closing, where the numbers are actually the same, but the buyer is significantly happier because they're not putting down as much money, or other conversations like that. So I think there are win-wins, and there's a lot of interesting things specifically within financing and negotiations that you can work on there.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, am I up?
I think you're up. Okay. I mean, unless you want to just keep, just staring at each other in dead air.
That's right. Okay, we got Max from Colorado Springs.
Hey, look at that.
That's from you're from, right?
Yep.
Do you know Max?
I know a few.
Okay, Max asks, what's the weirdest real estate trend you've seen come and go? Barn dominiums.
We did talk about barn dominiums. I don't know how weird. Well,
it's pretty
funky. Yeah, I don't know about that.
What are some trends?
I mean, there's still quite a bit of those, like the tiny homes, right? That's still a thing.
Yeah, tiny homes are a thing.
It's still a trend. If we're talking about the investing space specifically, I think the short-term rentals, there's been a lot of changes there. I don't know if I would call it weird. There's some cool things about it, some weird things about it, but the short-term rental market is definitely changing and continuing to change. So I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a lot harder even over the next couple of years, and we see more changes there.
You think so? Short-term rental, like the
Airbnb,
the amount of people that are doing it, you think that's like decreasing generally?
Yeah, I think you had this huge jump in people seeing it, especially in the post-COVID era of it was at its height. I think there were a lot more people using the services, and it was a lot more popular for renters, and it really got flooded with so many investors, and then you started seeing cities pull back. And
right.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that there will be more changes, and I'm not going to predict what the short-term market is going to look like in 5 or 10 years, but there's some pretty big changes that I think will continue to happen. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we'll have to have you back on for short-term rental diagnosis, the state of the industry kind of thing. All right, we got 2 more questions. I think we can fit in all 5. We'll do really quick, round the table. You guys ready? Just like first thing that comes to your mind. What's your dream renovation project, and what room would you tackle first? Patrick. Dream renovation.
Why'd I have to go first?
Because I pointed at you first. All right, fine. Levi. Dream renovation project.
You better be thinking of your answer then one. I think when I think of my living space, I love a good movie, TV show, reading, and a fireplace. So that kind of coalesces into, I would say, a living room. So I'm going to do a nice entertainment where the TV can be hidden, but a really comfortable couch to read on, and a fireplace. So living room is my spot.
Patrick?
I'm going to pick a little bit of a different approach.
Zag, babe.
Go for it for yours.
No, I'm not. I'm thinking outside.
Okay.
I want I want a very specific kind of like wooden fence. Like, do you guys know what I'm talking about? I'm a big fence guy. Like, there's that one fence. What's it called? Where it's just like the old looking wood, like you know what I mean. It's got like it looks kind of like a tic-tac-toe board. You know, like that fence.
Like a picket fence?
No, not picket. No, not picket. Like, what's it called?
I don't know, Patrick.
Wooden.
I like the fence.
First thing
you're saying that you want to do like a backyard. You want to renovate a backyard.
Yeah, it was like I want my backyard to look a very specific way because there's a fence. It's not like a picket fence. It's like it's one of those fences that has like like that, and it's got the 2 bars.
Okay.
You know.
One of those.
No, you guys aren't grasping. Anyways, first thing I'm doing when I buy a property.
I trust you.
I really like the aesthetic of those fences, and I want to build that fence around my yard, and then have like a grill there, and then grill hot dogs and hamburgers while looking at the fence. That's my first renovation project.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seems doable.
That seems very doable. I don't know why you didn't say this. I was gonna say like I'd renovate like an old theater or something and turn it into a house. It's a dream project. We can do whatever we want.
Oh,
what if there was a cool vintage theater that I could just renovate and turn into my own house?
Yeah, I just did one room. I
didn't understand the question.
Big room.
My mind went to fence.
My mind went to fence. All right, I think we got time for one more, and then wrap it up. Yeah. Okay. So Emily from Long Beach, California writes in, says, what do you do if a potential tenant doesn't have any credit history or rental history? How do you decide whether to give them a chance? So we had a little ha-has, and now we're going to actually get into the serious stuff to end.
That's a good question. I mean, it's a tough one because you always want to be fair to tenants. I think everyone's been a tenant, or most people have been tenants.
Yeah.
A lot of us have been in positions where we maybe don't have credit history coming out of college, maybe have debt. So in addition to being fair and being ethical in the first place, you also have rules and regulations depending on what city or state you're in. So there's a lot that goes into that. In some places, you can't use income, or you can't use income in a specific way. I think subject to your city's rules, we always look for some sort of income. So if they don't have previous income, you have some sort of job offer, future income, some sort of evidence that they can provide. You can also, in most places, talk to previous landlords, even if they were college students, whatever else. Co-signers are always a good option, so they might have a parent that's willing to sign. So yeah, it's a tough question to answer, but again, having been in those shoes before, there are a lot of options for the landlord also to both be fair and make sure that they're protected as well.
Yeah, for sure. You got anything insightful, Patrick?
I agree.
And there's a lot of good softwares out there, resources out there to use to get this information if you were so inclined to. Isn't that right, Levi?
Yes, there are.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice segue.
Yeah. All right. Guys, thanks for hanging out and discussing everything. Levi, thank you for being here to kind of talk.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's
good conversation.
Yeah, for sure. It's been enlightening. It's been awesome to hear about your adventures and experiences in the industry. Obviously, Patrick and I wish you both wish you luck in all future endeavors in property management, and we hope that you'll continue to come back and teach us things because we need some more learning. I think
so too.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your guys' first place too. It sounds like you might be going to business together.
Well, I guess we're buying a theater with a really nice fence.
Yeah,
so it's gonna be the wonkiest property in the greater Cincinnati area. Okay, cool. Well, that is another episode of the Rentish podcast in the books. Remember, follow us on all the social media platforms that are out there and make sure to subscribe to the podcast. 5 stars, review, rate, comment, whatever the thing is, clapping hands emojis and stuff like that in the comments. And then email any of your topic suggestions, feedback, just general praises. I know Patrick needs those to questions@therentishpod.com. You need positive feedback and encouragement.
That's what keeps me going.
You're doing a great job.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I've been Zach. That's been Patrick. That was Levi. Thank you guys. And we'll see you later.
Hey, listeners. If managing property finances feels like a full-time job, it's time to check out Ledger.ai. Ledger.ai makes property accounting simple by automating your finances, tracking expenses, and keeping you organized all without the stress. It's like having an accounting pro in your corner so you can focus on growing your portfolio. Visit ledger.ai/podcast today and let them handle the heavy lifting. That's ledgre.ai/podcast.